First of all, this is probably the most outstanding media panel that we could possibly hope to put together. And this promises to be a lot of fun. I can guarantee that. But what I can also tell you is all four of these gentlemen up here have never said no to yours truly when I've asked for an interview. They're the experts. These guys have forgotten more about racing than I'd ever hoped to know. And they're going to be very entertaining. And no, Miller, I'm not overselling it.
Yeah, you are, bro.
First of all, closest to me, Rick Benjamin, the principal of Carolina's production group. And Rick, I think the only job that you have not done in the TV business is being a TV weatherman. I used to be a weatherman on radio. I had a face for radio, folks. I don't think you were a TV weatherman.
No, never did that.
But you've done just about everything else, and your love of racing shines through in everything you do. I don't care if it's as an announcer. I don't care if it's as producer of what I can only call the most outstanding short track coverage that is out there. You are silky smooth, the perfect announcing voice, and quite frankly,
that's Despain. Ralph, that's not me.
Sirius
Got me confused.
Sirius Radio lost me as a subscriber the day you stopped doing a daily show. Dave Despain, MAV TV, but I'll tell you, my Sunday nights are not the same without the old wind tunnel show.
That makes three of us.
If there was an interviewer Hall of Fame, and I don't mean just for motorsports, I mean for all of the media, Dave would be in my first class of inductees, along with guys like the late, great Tim Russert and Johnny Carson. You guys are the pros at having the follow-up question, which is the key to being a good interviewer, something I lack. Your wind tunnel show, though, by far, that's where the race fans and racers themselves tuned in every week to hear what really was going on with that weekend's racing. It was the unvarnished truth. It was irreverent at times, but always fun and always entertaining, but always insightful. I miss that show more than you can imagine. Well, more than you do. Well, you probably miss it more than I do. Your love affair for the two-wheel variety of racing actually got me hooked on motorcycle racing, watching more of that. And, you know, that love of two-wheel racing, I understand, also gave you that urge to try some flat-track motorcycle racing yourself back in the day. And as a racer, you learned you were a hell of a good announcer and that you had a longer life expectancy as an announcer as well. Ralph Shaheen. Ralph, you also have called the racing action for just about anything that races. And I'm telling you, folks, if you lined him up on the PA at your local supermarket and had him announce the race to the checkout line, he'd make that sound so exciting with that same enthusiasm.
We might all be doing that before long. Anyway,
I'm not above that. If they're paying, I'm saying.
Hey, if Kroger,
welcome to Walmart.
If Kroger has an opening, we might be set here. But you would do that announcing with the same enthusiasm as the last lap at Daytona or an AMA Supercross event. And you also get my praise for being the man who saved the iconic National Speed Sport News brand. Yeah. Give him a big hand. All right.
I hope that means you're all subscribers.
Yeah, exactly.
Good Christmas present there, Ralph. Good stocking
That's
stuffer.
right. Sell.
And then we get to Robin Miller. Remember those old E.F. Hutton commercials? If they did one for open wheel racing, and I don't care if it's USAC short track stuff, whatever, or whether it's the Indianapolis 500 or anything in IndyCar, they would feature you because when Robin Miller talks, people listen. They might not always like what you say. In fact, quite often they might be rather ticked off at what you say. And but they're going to believe that it's the unvarnished truth from you as well. In addition to your outspoken coverage of the sport on Racer.com, which is the mailbag segment that you do is fabulous. You can also see him on the NBC Sports Channel coverage of IndyCar, where, as you put it, you still haven't been fired yet.
They always say, "Are you working?" I say, I never call anybody in December or January because I figure they'd forget I'm on the payroll, and then by April it's too late to fire me.
All right, guys, I am just going to throw this question out, and I'm going to let you guys go wild with it. You can arm wrestle over who gets to go first. How have the media needs or the demands of race fans changed over the years? Go ahead, Ralph.
I don't think they've changed at all. I think the fans want to know as much as they can possibly know about their favorite driver or series or track or whatever. What's changed is the incredible amount of information that's available to them. When I was in the 60s, wanting to be a flat track motorcycle racer, we wanted to know who won the race. And the only way to find that out, if you lived in Iowa, was to subscribe to Cycle News, this West Coast newspaper. And you had to pay out the butt to get a first-class postage subscription. They printed the paper on Monday after the race. You got it the following Monday after the next race. And that was as quick as you could find out who won, because there wasn't any place else. I was clever enough to figure out that I could call the racetrack and impersonate the San Francisco Chronicle and get the results from the San Jose Mile like that. And then I tell all my buddies. Now, I mean, if you can't find the complete, well, mostly it's live somewhere on the internet for the big series. If not, that series has got some catching up to do. So that same fan today has access to all of this stuff, and they think that that's their need now because that's what's available to them. What you need is what you get used to having. And so the challenge for us and for you and for the rest of the racing world is, how do you supply that information? Which avenue is going to be the most effective for getting to the fan that you want to talk to? And that's where an understanding of the technology comes in. And at that point, I pass because I'm 69 years old and I don't understand how Twitter works.
Okay, I'm sitting next to Ralph, and Speed Sport News was the Bible. It was the way you found out what was going on in racing, and you had to wait on it. It came on Thursdays. And the other thing that gradually and truly the Indianapolis Star, because I hadn't started racing yet, but I was writing 52 columns a year about USAC racing, midgets and sprints and dirt cars and Indy cars. Then I'd write an advance on the Kokomo midget race or the Terre Haute sprint car race, and then I'd write a story about after it was over. What's changed now is people don't read like they did, and if they do, they're all our age. Sorry, Ralph, not you, the other three. And kids want to see it right here on their their handheld telephone. And the thing that's toughest is, and all you promoters know, how do you get publicity? How do you tell fans? There's a midget race here Saturday night, I'm told, at where the Pacers play basketball. There hasn't been one ad in the paper. They've done everything on Facebook and social media. They haven't spent one penny on that. Now, maybe they'll have a hell of a crowd. I don't know. But it's a tough thing for the promoters because Bob Sargent's here, and he's done a good job at Terre Haute and trying to get the Hoosier 100 going again. And other than Dave First, the local ABC affiliate, none of the television stations even recognize that there's racing outside the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. They don't get any coverage whatsoever. So it is the toughest thing in the world, whether it's the Speedrome or Terre Haute or the fairgrounds, to get anybody to pay attention to anymore, because you don't have guys that are passionate like we were that are writing for those papers anymore because nobody cares, and that's the toughest thing. So you got to almost be your own PR machine if you're a track.
I think to what you were talking about there, it's, as Dave was saying, it's not what they want that's changed. It's more about the delivery systems of how they're getting that information that has changed. And with that is the fact that you can't rely on just one. You can't rely on just a cell phone. You can't rely on just getting it through the internet or however. You've got to be able to go across all those different levels to expose what it is you're trying to put out there, whether it's an event, your team, your sponsor, whatever it might be. You've got to be in all those different avenues because not everybody's getting it from just one of those. everybody's getting it usually from multiple sources. So you need to be in front of them on just about every one of those if you can.
I think the other thing, you mentioned Sirius XM, and I still do a show or two there occasionally, and I'm astonished by the lack of knowledge of people who call those shows who are ostensibly NASCAR fans and who take the time to have a satellite radio subscription and listen to that channel. There's 230 channels. And so I think, as an industry, one of the things we need to do is do a better job of providing context. We've all been doing this a long time, obviously. Most of you, I'm sure, have too. But if we're going to keep this sport going and grow it again, we've got to figure out a way to educate kids. I was talking to Richie Tobias out here before we came in, who's been around this 100 years, it seems like, too. And we were having that same conversation. He's a track operator now. And, how do you get dads to bring their kids again today? It's a challenge for every one of us to do that. And, I did a couple of serious shows in the last 2 weeks, and at the end of the afternoon, I was still scratching my head thinking, these people don't know anything about this sport, and they watch it all the time. So the kids coming along, and we have to do a better job of explaining what is so cool about this and how it operates to people. This is a hard sport to understand for people who don't know it.
Now I'm going to get myself in trouble for the first time this evening on this panel. You mentioned the fans don't have the knowledge of the sport. I'm sorry, and I won't mention names to piss anybody off over at Sirius, but there's too many of the hosts over at Sirius.
Sure.
There's too many of the writers that I see online. Yeah. I call the NASCAR chase. I said they only got the chase going because the media is too lazy to come up with stories on their own. And the chase feeds them a story that just naturally flows. And right now, it's only 26 more races till the chase starts. And that's the story that comes out. All right, Miller, I'm going to aim this one right at you to get this one going.
Let me lean back.
Today, I see a lot of so-called journalists. Again, I won't mention any names. They're not up on this stage, that's for sure. They think cutting and pasting PR is writing a story. The question for you, though, is can you still tell it like it is? Can the juicy stories be told? Can the personalities be developed? Or have we just become way too politically correct to have fun?
I think it depends on who you work for. When I worked at Speed, thanks to Dave, all the times I got to go in Wind Tunnel and help him, the only time I was ever censored was our boss, Frank Wilson, would say, quit bad-mouthing NASCAR and quit making fun of the races and toothless hillbillies that watch it, because those people buy. So that was the one thing I was told, but that was the lecture we got. And NBC never says anything that you can't say this. Racer's been great. The mailbag, some guy wrote a question today and said, hey, Miller, you said back in July we'd be appalled at how IndyCar treated the Auto Club Speedway. So I finally told him today in the mailbag, I said they'd had the intern call Dave Allen back, the president of Fontana's racetrack, instead of Mark Miles or C.J. O'Donnell or somebody. They'd have an intern call. That's the biggest slap in the face. And so they had the most exciting IndyCar race in the last 50 years, and now they're not going back. But to get to your point, that's why I like Kyle Petty, and Dave does too, because he'll say in the middle of a thing, why are we talking about this guy? He has no chance to win the race. Whereas if you listen to it, and they don't believe it. 43 guys are in the race today. Anybody could win. Really? Anybody could win. No shit. Anybody could win? God, I better watch this. Anybody. Whereas in IndyCar racing, they're honest to God might be 12 or 13 different guys. There's only 22 cars, but there's half the field could win the race. So what you've got is you've got DW, who was always on Dave's show and he's a great interview, but they can't tell the truth. They can't say that Chase is bullshit. They can't say, we just had a champion that missed a third of the season. This is a crock of shit. Who are we selling this to the public for? They'll have to say, isn't this a great story? Isn't this great?
Just want my microphone.
It makes me crazy that they're all justifying, Larry McReynolds, you were a chief mechanic for Earnhardt. He'd be going nuts if the guy won the race. He missed the first third of the season. So I think NASCAR is great, though. I really do.
we protected Miller from some of the things that we didn't think
From
he needed
himself.
to know
Yeah.
on wind tunnel. I was not surprised today. My boss walked in and said, "I just got a phone call from," and I'm not going to name him, but you can't get a hell of a lot higher up the hierarchy in NASCAR than this guy. And I said, "Really? What's up?" And he said, "Well, he thinks we ought to cancel wind tunnel." I said, "Really? Are we going to do that?" Or he said, "No, I told him we couldn't do that. We weren't going to do that." And he said, "Well, listen, could you just have him not talk about NASCAR anymore?" Which I thought was revealing of an attitude. And the problem with that is everybody becomes a cheerleader. And that's just, as Miller puts it, that's just bullshit. By the way, you're absolutely wrong about the championship. The fact that the guy missed a third of the season but came back and qualified, and then when all the money and all the chips were on the line, won, that's the definition of a champion. That's like winning the Super Bowl. It's the same thing.
Well,
So
in that bullshit
absolutely
system it is.
wrong.
Yeah, I agree. He made the most of that system. You're
It's the
right.
it's the first time that I've been interested in a NASCAR championship in a long time.
Which is great because
It's
everybody that used to write to Speed or Windbag or Mailbag, they'd say, Despain, he's just a mouthpiece for NASCAR. And I'd say, he doesn't even like stock car racing.
It's not that. It's not that I don't like NASCAR. It's that I don't like consistency racing. It's a hell of a lot less of a travesty to have Kyle Busch win this year's championship than it would have been if Ryan Newman had passed one more guy last year.
We were so
and
hoping
won.
Ryan Newman would
you
win that
can't-
championship.
If you line up 36 weekends a year against the same 43 guys and you never win a race and you can be the champion, that's a bad system. This system is great compared to that. But to the point,
I'm having a great time right here. How about everybody else? I'm having fun.
I'm going to make this point quickly and then shut up. The problem is that the media are now viewed as partners, okay? Instead of being reporters who go cover the event, you're a partner. Well, you don't criticize your partner in public, do you? No, maybe. If you've got constructive criticism, you make it after the fact, although don't make it to the guy who tried to get wind tunnel off the air because he don't give a shit. So you end up with a bunch of reporters that not only do they just slice press releases together to make their stories, but if the story has any kind of meat to it, they're not going to do it. They just don't want to take that risk. They don't want to lose their job. They may or may not know anything about the sport. And some of this sounds like old guy pontificating about the young people coming up. There are exceptions. There are people out there who really know, and people who really care and are frustrated by all this. But when you turn the media into a bunch of cheerleaders, you lose a very important part of why they're there.
And see, I'm a big proponent that you don't have to be a cheerleader to be effective selling the sport. I've done drag racing coverage where I've asked the drag racer, hey, your team is struggling. What the heck's wrong? I put them in a bad situation, but they got a chance to answer honestly. Fans are not stupid and not as stupid as they think they are in some forms of racing. And all I know is Rolf's really glad we're not talking about the truck series. But no.
I think, one of the things that jumps out to me out of this is something that I'm very passionate about and very challenged by in owning speed sport now. It was the same thing with my broadcasting, but with speed sport comes something a little bit different because it's 80 some odd years old now, and everybody has a passion for it. And now I'm responsible for not upsetting you guys all with it. For me, speed sport is very similar to owning the NFL in that I have to protect that logo. And Chris worked very, very hard to establish what that logo meant. I have to make sure it doesn't go downhill in any way, shape, or form. You hear the NFL saying it's all about protecting the shield. Well, for us, it's protecting that logo, making sure that journalistically that speed sport brand name never changes. That being said, Tony Stewart has his situation in Canandaigua, New York. In today's world, there's a massive rush to see who can get it out on Twitter first. What I tell my guys is, you're never going to be first. Don't even worry about it. Somebody who is already there in the grandstands has periscoped it, tweeted it. It's on Facebook. It's here, there, and everywhere. Don't worry about being first. Be right.
And go beyond just the surface
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
You know, tell people what they don't know.
So to that, what we did is, look, take the time, do the reporting that journalists do, get the facts, get the story right, put it out there. What I'm hoping is that after you've read it on Twitter, you've seen the Periscope video, you've done all those different things on Facebook, then you're going to come to Speed Sport and find out what really happened. Or Racer for Miller, or whatever the case might be. But get a real journalist's story take on what took place. So, for example, we took the time to set up, because we knew so many people are hearing this story about this sprint car deal, don't even know what driving a sprint car is like, right? So we brought a sprint car into the studio. We brought a bunch of experts in, put them in different positions around the car, and had them explain the challenges of just driving the car. That's part of telling that story and hopefully giving insight to what could happen to lead to a situation like that, right? It doesn't matter. We're not saying this is why that happened. We're just saying, okay, understand this is what took place. So it's going this extra mile, if you will, to journalism like that, whatever the avenue is, whether it's with the written word, Periscope. You can do it on Periscope. You can do it on Twitter. Just get it right.
Okay, Rick, I'm going to start off with you with this next question, because you've covered NASCAR when it was regional, all the way up to the big times. How do you foresee the media landscape changing in the next 5 to 10 years? We've seen so many changes in the last 10.
No question about that. I think, as we've all more or less touched on, we're all doing a lot more. I mean, making Robin Miller an online star. Now, there's something I never thought I would see happen.
Rick, I can run my own little video.
Yes, he can.
It's unbelievable.
Which is cool. And that's where this is all headed. I mean, MAV, Lucas Oil TV is coming out with there's an app that's going to debut January 1st. Speed Sport does a ton of stuff online. We're headed in that direction a little bit, although what we do isn't really geared for that yet. But we're getting to a point where network television, as we know it, is undergoing dramatic changes everywhere. Cable networks, broadcast networks. And we've got to figure out a way to deliver racing coverage, event coverage, and everything else. And Dave talked about Fans Choice TV, the bike, the channel that kind of does AMA and a bunch of other NASCAR-related content now. We've got to develop something that really works for most people in this industry to make that happen, because, you know, I can tell you my kids who are 36 and 28 and 22 are watching a lot on tablets and phones and not much on the TV in the family room. So we've got to be ready for that.
Dave, other than MAV TV becoming the replacement for Speed Channel and growing to even I can get it on Comcast, Comcast, please wake up. Where do you see the landscape going?
Well, I think to look ahead 10 years, all you got to do is look back 10 years. 10 years ago, there was no Twitter. Yikes. I mean, look at Twitter today. Look at the amount of information that changes, you know, that's communicated by that one medium. And it didn't even exist 10 years ago. So it's really, really hard to look 10 years down the road and say, well, this is what's going to happen, because it's probably going to be some technology we haven't even thought of yet. So what happens, I think, is, and behind that, you've got all the technological changes, but then you've got all the corporate reorganization that happens among all the media companies fighting over, is it going to be delivery system? Is it going to be households? Is it going to be content? You know, what do I need to have to be the media giant of 2026? And we don't ever see much of that, but that's has a lot to do with what we end up seeing on whatever outlet we're looking at. So to bring it back to a level that maybe makes some sense for a track promoter, you know, you can't realistically be expected to be an authority on that. But there's a guy named Clay Elkins, Carolina Speedway, gave a really interesting presentation last year here at Humpy's Speedway Benefits deal about how he hired a social media expert and just paid her to do the work. And she essentially took over the promotion of his track, which was not doing very well. And in the span of a year, they converted his promotion entirely to Facebook. promotes the track on Facebook, period. Now, they do some other social media stuff too, but it is essentially a Facebook-driven promotion. No more advertising buys, and he put the track in the black. So I think what it requires of a promoter is to think about it differently, be willing to embrace the technology. If you can't figure it out, find somebody who understands it and figure out a way to make a deal with them, because if you're not part of that trend, you're going to get left behind.
I would say to that, depends on who you want to get. Do you want people our age? Do you want kids? Do you want teenagers? Who are you trying to attract? Because the different levels of social media attract different people. The Facebook crowd is much different than the Twitter crowd, is nothing like the Instagram crowd. So if you want to know where it's going, first of all, decide who it is you want to get, and then you figure out which social media talks to that group. The thing that's coming next is already gone. We missed it already. That's how fast this stuff is changing. If you really want to know what the hot thing is to get to the younger crowd, come to Supercross with me, go to a go-kart race somewhere, go where the young people are, because they're not at your dirt track. They're probably not at your drag strip, certainly not at the road course, and they're definitely not at a NASCAR race. Okay? I hate to be the bearer of bad news. That's not where they are. Come to Supercross, come to a little go-kart track where WKA is running. They got all the kids out there, and they're going crazy on their cell phones. That's where you find out where the next thing is, because they're doing it right now. And you can reach them immediately. You just walk up and go, hey, what do you want? I got a 9-year-old, I got a 12-year-old. I have no idea. I mean, by the time I get home by the end of the weekend, they'll be doing something completely different. That's how fast it moves. So I can't wait to get to Anaheim in January, because that's when I'll figure out what the new thing is. Because as soon as I get there, all the kids on the 250s, they're all doing it. And you just go one pit area. Okay, that's the next thing. I got to get that app, because that's where everybody's at.
The other thing is, when you think, I think I told Dave, we were down at the hall in 2004 or 5, whatever it was, Kevin Kalkoven said they had a deal on Spike TV, and there was, there'd be 10,000 people watching a Champ Car race on Spike TV, and there'd be more people in the grandstand. So he's gotten mad, and he said, instead of paying for television, we ought to just put all our races on the internet. Well, guess what? That's what it's going to be in 4 or 5 years, probably. It is all going to be on the internet, because if it's not the National Football League, they're probably not going to be interested. And I think that what's interesting is, as we've gone on at Racer in the last 3 or 4 years, it's the videos they want. It's not stories. They don't want to read stories. They want a 2 or 3 minute video. The most watched thing we've ever had was I did a series on Dan Gurney, and then I did an interview with Kevin Swindell and drove down and saw him and then Ralph put it on Speed Tour. It's a 4 or 5 minute video that people want the instant
Miller, you want to know what the most watched thing is? Ken Block.
Oh, hands down.
You want to know where it's headed? Ken Block.
Ask Ken to be your marketing
Ken
man.
Block is all you need to know about where this stuff is headed. The guy gets 60 million views every time he goes off and does one of these Gymkhana deals. Then he goes and he gets people like Monster and Ford and all these major corporations to back him putting that together. And it's one guy basically taking a year to half a year to set up picking which city he's going to go to, lays out his course, does all the proper paperwork to get clearance to do it, records this thing, sits back and watches the view meter just roll. So that's what I'm saying. You guys have to get way out of your comfort zone to figure out how to catch on to that rocket ship.
Because unless you're a fan, he makes racing look pretty lame.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the things he does with that car are so spectacular that if you don't have some appreciation for competition and what it takes to beat another guy in a car that's on the edge of traction, hell, I'd rather watch Ken Block,
Do most of you know the story of Ken, how he got going, DC Shoes and all that? He forms a shoe company, makes millions out of it, sells the whole thing, right? So this is what's really crazy about this whole thing. So here's this very successful businessman. He's an okay rally driver, if you really want to get down to it. But he's a mega star because of these videos. Because of the videos, he's come up with a whole nother brand called Hoonigan that's gone off and just lit the world on fire over there. He's got deals going with Ford, where he's one of their main people when they go to SEMA and they unveil cars. He's got Ken Block versions of race cars that they're doing. It has nothing to do. It's not the world rally driving champion. It's a guy that does Gymkhana videos. Think about that. So everything you guys are arguing about Kyle Busch does not have 60 million views on anything.
And the other thing is, some of the people say, well, you know how many takes they took for Ken Block in San Francisco? And I said, I don't care how many takes they took. He blocked off the street, and he's sliding down Knob Hill going 80 miles an hour, and I'm watching it.
And I can tell you my 9-year-old doesn't care. And that's the key.
They don't care how edited it is.
And that's
either,
what Ford wants.
Yep.
Think about that. That's what Ford wants. That's what Monster wants. And that goes back to the whole thing of why Tim's brought everybody in here today. That last panel talking about how you go about getting sponsors and all that different stuff. You got to think this way.
Okay, guys. A lot of racetrack promoters out here, a lot of series promoters in the room, a lot of folks whose livelihood depends on those people doing well, and a championship race car driver in Julia Landauer in the back. So, my question for you is, how do all these people get your attention to cover what they are up to? And I'm going to throw it out to the first person willing to.
It's real easy for me. Get a sponsorship deal with Lucas Oil, and you're in. And without that, a little harder to get in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've always told young drivers who come up to all of us by the busload, two ways to do it: run up front, stick it on the wall. Those are the answers. Give us a story to tell, and you as track operators and series operators, that's really your mandate too. Give us a story that's compelling. I'm running a race Saturday night at XYZ Dirt Track isn't the story. The fact that there's a 12-year-old late model driver who's won 4 features in a row, that's a story. If you've got that, that's a story. That's the kind of thing we're looking for. I know Ralph's interested in things like that at the paper and the website. And those are the things that really make a difference. When we decide who to put on TV, that's what we're looking for, is somebody who's got a great story to tell. We're all old enough to have drivers we really like who've been doing this for 30 or 40 years. That's not the future of the sport. And if we're going to be able to come back here in 10 years and have these conferences and talk about a thriving industry, as much as I hate to say it, we've got to focus forward, not backward. And that's painful for me to admit.
All I know is I went to the AMA Fairgrounds Mile a couple years ago, and there's this pretty little 90-pound blonde, and she gets on this bike, and it's not the big class, it's the one underneath it. She never takes her feet off the pegs. Her name was Shayna Texter, and she wins. And I go up and talk to her. I said, where did you come from? What's going on? Oh, my brother races the big class, and I'm trying to get to the top. Well, she's up there now. If anybody in IndyCar, and if anybody would have had any brain, because I just did a big story and did a video with her and said, what's your goal? Do you want to drive cars? No, I'd just like to be in the 250 someday. That'd be kind of fun, There's nobody promoting this girl, and that's exactly the kind of thing. Why does Danica Patrick still sell all these T-shirts when she runs 21st every week? Why? Why do people want to watch her? I don't know, but they do. And if you got for a local track, there's a girl named Sierra Jackson that's been running these modifieds in the West on the Pacific Northwest, and she's tough. She wins races. Davey Hamilton said, Miller, she's the best female race driver I have ever seen. She's just flat out good. And he goes, she can't even get a sponsor. So for the promoters, it's just got to be tough to have that hook, because if you're a promoter in Indiana and you have a race in Indiana Sprint Week, it works because people show up. It's whatever it is, it's just a popular series, and you want to go out there and watch because it's the best racing there is. However, not everybody has that.
I would tell you this, and everybody's in a different position with what they need. For me, with speed sport, it's a little bit different than like with Rick or Dave or Robin when we're doing our broadcasting stuff. But with speed sport, I'm a content shop. I got a magazine, we got TV shows, we got the website, we got all these things we need to fill with content. How many of you are not calling me with content? I'd take it. I'm not even asking you to buy an ad. That'd be nice. But there's lots of ways of building partnerships to help each other because we're all in it together. I said this same thing last year. We're all in it together. So if you guys don't survive, I don't survive. So I need you to survive, and hopefully you need me to survive. But how many people, I've got a booth here this weekend, how many of you are going to come by? My editors are here. How many track promoters, how many drivers, how many sanction body people are going to come by and say, are you guys getting our stuff? How do we make sure you're getting our stuff? Who do I send it to? Sometimes it's just that easy. The creative stories, they'll come. We'll get there. But I'll take your results too. So a lot of times it's just you guys reaching out. Now, switching hats to the broadcaster side. I can't tell you how many times I'd go to Daytona with CBS when we were there. CBS logo on my shirt. I'm there to do the Daytona 500 on national TV. And PR people, I'd be walking through the pits. CBS guy right here talking to millions of people come Sunday. Never even come up and say hi. Right? So I can be the journalist. We want to do that. But sometimes we just need a little bit of, come tell me the story. If you know something, if your driver, got a new dog and named it Daytona, come tell me. But you can't believe how many times I'd be there for 2 weeks and not one PR person or a marketing person would come up and tell me anything.
Let me take one step further. I met with the IndyCar PR guy the other day, and he said, what can we do? And I said, here's what I'd do. I'd go to the Chili Bowl, and I'd get a booth, and I'd get an IndyCar, and I'd get Graham Rahal and Marco Andretti and Joseph Newgarden, and I'd get Joseph Newgarden to ride in the Chili Bowl, and Brian Clausen will get him a car, and he'll get a test day. There's 15,000 people there every night. Dave knows because he broadcasts it, and he's been there the last couple of years. It's the greatest collection of open-wheel fans that don't watch an IndyCar race you'll ever assemble. And I said, you'll do more good for your series. You'll do more positive PR in 4 nights than you will in the next 4 years. And I said, give out stickers and hats and schedules. And if Joseph Newgarden is Sarah Fisher's teammate, Sarah ran last year, it would be great. Here was the response. Yeah, that's a good idea. So I called Brian Clausen because he was teammates with Newgarden at Indy last year and the year before, 2 years ago. And he goes, I'd love to have the guy be my teammate. I'll get him a test day and all that. So we get the wheels in motion. A couple weeks ago, I get a letter from one of the higher ups at IndyCar that says, we've looked over and we've decided that Tulsa's not really our demographic, and we're going to pass on the Chili Bowl this year. This dumb son of a bitch doesn't understand that all the people that are in Tulsa don't live in Tulsa. They come from all over the country, and they're open wheel fans that might watch your race, but they won't because they don't care. They don't care about any of the drivers. Rico Abreu's already got more fans than every IndyCar driver added together, multiplied by 10.
Remember the conversation you and I had in Milwaukee this summer about the terrible state of public relations in IndyCar racing? I mean, not to beat on a series that we both have some involvement with.
They deserve it.
Well, that may be true. We all do. We all have involvement. But the truth of the matter is the best single thing, and Ralph made this point beautifully, that you can do is get a terrific public relations person. The social media specialist, very important. But if they don't have well-written material, well-shot art, good little videos for them to post, it doesn't mean anything. And it's amazing to me the lack of press releases that come my way a lot of times from IndyCar teams. Here we are, we do Honda's coverage in the sport. We get Hondas, and that's it. And seriously, you cannot invest better money in this than to hire somebody who really knows the art of good public relations, and that is not cranking out press releases. That is story ideas. That's calling your local print person, your local broadcast person, and saying, hey, come to our track Friday, we're going to put you in a car. Come to our track Saturday, we're going to set you up with our point leader. Whatever it might be. We'll find you the 12-year-old young lady who's winning modified races and get you time with her. That's what it really takes. I mean, that's the results are cool, and the fact that Billy Bob found a new sponsor for next week, that's great. But the really good stories that build fans are, we don't get a chance. We don't even know some of the times that those things are going on.
Okay, our last comments around the room before they shut us down and go serve some beer. I'm just going to ask this flat out, and I want to start with Rick right here on the end, and then, because mainly I just want to end with Miller.
The last word.
Is this the last generation of reporters and media stars that are going to have really good, juicy stories to tell later on in life?
There are really good, juicy stories to tell always. I mean, one of the things that keeps me coming back is the fact that, A, I loved this since I was a little kid, and B, you'll think, I've seen it all. And then you'll go to some race somewhere, or we'll watch something that we get video in, and I'll think, holy Christmas, did you see that? That couldn't possibly, and those are the things that keep us coming back. I think finding good young on-air reporters, print reporters, online reporters primarily now to write about this, that is a challenge. Because all too often, a local newspaper, and in Charlotte, which is one of the two hubs of the sport in this country, along with this city, there is one full-time guy on the Charlotte Observer, and he doesn't even cover NASCAR all the time. He was the golf guy. Yeah. And, it's just, his writing is okay, and I like David Scott, but he's not a guy who grew up going to the racetrack. So those kinds of things happen all over the country if a paper does cover the sport. Walk into the media center at a NASCAR race or an IndyCar race this year and count heads. There are way more empty seats in there than there are people filling them working. And you can help that situation by nurturing young talent that you see, PR people. If you've got a reporter in your market that's interested in this sport, help them learn about it. Get them experience. Show them how cool it is. Make it worth their while to cover this sport, and that's where they'll come from, I think.
Great point. Dave?
Yeah, I would agree with that last point in a big way. I mean, we've kind of covered a lot of ground here, and I'm not sure how much nuts and bolts we've given you that we think might help you, but one thing I would encourage, and it's a little off point, is you're not going to find the next big thing. There's not going to be one thing that's going to turn your track from whatever it is now to whatever it is you want it to be. It's going to be a lot of little pieces. It's going to be finding that reporter. It's going to be figuring out which social media works best for you. It's figuring out who's your potential fan. It's promoter 101 in a way, but I think an important part of it, the first guy up, and I missed his name, and I apologize for that, mentioned passion. Passion is still what drives this sport. It's the reason most of you are in it, I suspect. It's the reason all of us are in it. It's the reason most of the participants are in it. It's driven by passion. But to make it a business, you've really got to be able to cover all the bases and make sure that you're getting every ounce out of every effort that you make, instead of sitting around hoping to find that brass ring that's going to bring this flood of kids into your racetrack, because that's not going to happen.
Yeah, no, Dave's exactly right. One new social media thing isn't going to make that difference. It's going to have to be all of this. But don't worry, there are plenty of people out there looking to tell the stories. There's a lot of people out there willing to print or broadcast the story for you. And I think there's still plenty of younger announcers and journalists out there who are looking to get started in this business. I know we get calls about it all the time at Speed Sport. So I think there will be people out there to get those juicy stories. And those juicy stories, as long as there's two guys with two race cars, will always be there.
Miller, please don't disappoint.
Oh, don't put the pressure. Here's the thing. If you go into a press room at a NASCAR race, Rick said it best, or an IndyCar race, and the PR people are sitting there, and you said, hey, there's a sprint car race 30 minutes away. You guys want to go? And they would look at you and go, why in the hell would we want to go to a sprint car race? We're not getting paid to do that. Well, it's kind of filtered down to the people that cover the races now. Because if you, at the Indy 500, this year will be different because it's the 100th, so maybe the Boston Globe will come back, and maybe the Miami Herald, and maybe the LA Times, and all the papers that usually cover the Indy 500 will show up because it's the 100th. But most of the newspapers don't cover IndyCar racing anymore. They probably don't even cover NASCAR that much. NASCAR's lost a lot of its clout. But you've got golf writers, or you've got basketball writers. You've got people that are covering racing that don't really care about it. It's just a job, and they're hoping they can make it to 55 or 65 or whatever the buyout's going to be. That's all they care. We're different because, I mean, I was working on Jim Hurtubise' IndyCar. I was a stooge. I actually wasn't allowed to touch the car. But I was 18 years old, and then I started racing in USAC, and I'm covering the guys I'm writing about, and I'm racing the guys I'm writing about, and that's not going to happen anymore. You're just going to have to find somebody, like Ralph said, and Rick said, if somebody, a young kid, like I just put this kid to racer as an intern for free, but he's learning about. He's gung ho about racing. He wants to cover racing, so we sent him to a motorcycle race, and we sent him to the indoor motocross, and he's one of the few that's probably going to pick that up. But when you guys have your local papers, that's probably the lifeblood of your support. I would think would be the local newspaper that still has somebody that cares and writes a weekly column for you, because that's I can't emphasize enough how few people read newspapers anymore, and that's probably why websites are doing well, because the stories aren't very long most of the time, and people can read them in 2 minutes and it's over. But I'm just lucky I grew up in the era and the city that I did, and I didn't kill myself racing, although I tried several times.
You did good, Miller. Okay, guys, let's hear a round of applause for our media panel.